The alarm was a multi-million-dollar scream. In the most exclusive hospital suite in the country, the machine keeping billionaire Alistair Sterling alive was flashing a single, fatal error: system failure. Dr. Alana Vernon, the celebrity cardiologist, could only stare in horror. "The manufacturer is on the phone. They say it's a sealed unit," the hospital's chief engineer panicked. But Leo Maxwell, the rookie nurse they barely noticed, smelled the faint, sharp scent of burnt ozone. He saw the flicker of a dying capacitor through a ventilation slit. "It's the power regulator," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The billionaire's son turned on him with venom. "Did I ask for an opinion from the help? Get your scrapyard hands off that machine before I have you fired." They saw a clumsy nurse. They didn't see the boy who could build an engine from spare parts. And as the experts stared at their useless black box, Leo prepared to perform a miracle not of medicine, but of pure, gritty, mechanical genius. The sovereign wing of the Elysian Fields Medical Center was less a hospital and more a monument to the power of wealth over mortality. In the presidential suite, Alistair Sterling lay in a state of medically induced calm, his frail body tethered to the silent, gleaming monolith that was the OmniLife 7 integrated support system. The machine was a masterpiece of modern engineering, a seamless blend of ventilator, dialysis, and advanced life support, all humming along with whisper-quiet perfection. It was said to be foolproof. Dr. Alana Vernon, a woman whose sharp suit and sharper cheekbones were as famous as her medical credentials, exuded an aura of absolute control. She scanned Mr. Sterling's vitals on a transparent tablet, her expression serene. "Everything is perfectly stable, Tristan," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "The OmniLife is performing flawlessly. It practically runs itself." Tristan Sterling, the billionaire's son, paced the plush carpet like a caged panther, all tailored aggression and simmering impatience. "For what this hospital charges, it had better," he sneered, glancing at his gold watch. In the corner of the room, Leo Maxwell moved with the practiced quiet of someone trying to be invisible. He checked the drip rate on an 4 bag, his movements economical and precise. But his attention kept drifting to the OmniLife 7. His ears, trained by years of listening to the groans and whines of dying engines in his grandfather's scrapyard, picked up on something no one else could hear: a faint, high-frequency hum from the machine's base, a sound that was just a half-tone sharp. It was the sound of something straining. Driven by a mechanical intuition that was as much a part of him as his own heartbeat, he approached Dr. Vernon. "Excuse me, doctor," he said softly, causing her to look up with an irritated frown. "The machine, there's a slight vibration in the power supply. It sounds a little strained." Dr. Vernon didn't even bother to stand. She gave him a look of withering condescension. "Nurse, your job is to monitor the patient's biological signs, not the multi-million-dollar piece of proprietary technology you aren't qualified to read, let alone diagnose. Please, stick to your duties." Tristan let out a short, mocking laugh. As if on cue, the door swished open and Julian Croft, the hospital's chief biomedical engineer, entered. He was a man who seemed assembled from a corporate brochure, neat, tidy, and carrying a locked briefcase. "Right on time for the weekly diagnostic," he announced cheerfully. He opened his case, produced a tablet, and plugged a cable into the OmniLife service port. A moment later, a series of green check marks filled his screen. "There you have it, Doctor," Croft said with a satisfied smile. "All systems nominal. Every circuit is responding perfectly. She's the best machine money can buy. Absolutely foolproof." The engineer's official, data-driven declaration made Leo's analog observation seem ridiculous. Tristan seized on it, turning to Leo with a predatory grin. "Hear that? Foolproof. Maybe you should get your ears checked. Or better yet, just stick to changing sheets. That's what a nurse is for, isn't it?" The class-based insult landed like a punch. Leo felt the heat rise in his cheeks. He couldn't argue with a diagnostic report. He was a nurse, Croft was the expert. With a quiet "yes, sir," he retreated to the far side of the room, the shame burning hot in his gut. And then it happened. One moment, the room was filled with the soft, rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator. The next, a deafening, continuous alarm shrieked through the suite. The gleaming screen of the OmniLife 7 went black for a second before flashing a single, horrifying message in stark red letters: system failure. Every function, ventilator, dialysis, heart support, died at once. Alistair Sterling's vitals, suddenly untethered from their mechanical anchor, began to plummet. The calm, professional facades of the experts vaporized. "He's crashing," Vernon yelled, her composure gone. "Get me a crash cart. Manual resuscitation, now." Julian Croft was frantically stabbing at his tablet, which was now as dead as the machine it was connected to. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking. "I'm calling the manufacturer. They have to have a remote override," he stammered. "What do you mean there's no override? A technician can be here in 3 hours? He doesn't have 3 hours. Tristan's face was pale with terror, which quickly curdled into incandescent rage. "What is happening? What did you do?" he screamed at Croft. His wild, panicked eyes scanned the room for a target, for someone to blame. And then they landed on Leo. He pointed a trembling, accusatory finger. You were hovering over it earlier. You said something was wrong with it. Did you touch something? You broke it." The accusation was irrational, a desperate lashing out, but in that moment of chaos, it was all he had. It was this primal scream of blame that led directly to the hook, the moment Leo, smelling the unmistakable scent of a fried capacitor, tried to explain the real problem, only to be shoved aside. The fuse had been lit. The room was about to explode. The piercing siren of the main alarm was finally silenced, replaced by the urgent, rhythmic beeping of the mobile heart monitor from the crash cart. A resident had taken over manual ventilation, squeezing a blue ambu bag in a desperate, physical rhythm, a primitive solution to a futuristic problem. Each pump of the bag was a stark reminder of how far the mighty had fallen. Alistair Sterling's life was now being sustained by hand, his multi-million-dollar safety net having evaporated into a useless slab of metal and plastic. Ignoring Tristan Sterling's wild accusations, Leo's focus was entirely on the machine. His senses, honed by a youth spent diagnosing sick machinery, were screaming at him. He leaned closer to a ventilation slit at the base of the OmniLife 7, the same spot where the abnormal hum had emanated. The sharp, acrid smell of burnt electronics, like ozone after a lightning strike, was undeniable. "It's the power regulator," Leo said again, his voice calm and certain amidst the rising panic. The main input capacitor blew. It would cause a cascade failure and shut down the whole system to protect the internal processors. This quiet, confident diagnosis was the one thing Tristan Sterling's terrified rage could not tolerate. He lunged forward, shoving Leo back with both hands. "I told you to shut up," he roared, his face contorted. "Get your scrapyard hands off that machine before I have you arrested. You think you know more than the people who built it?" Dr. Vernon, desperate to reassert a semblance of order, sided with the aggressor. "He's right, nurse. Step away from the equipment now. You are interfering with my patient's care. One more word and I'll have security escort you out." The threat was absolute. Humiliated and physically pushed aside, Leo could only watch as the two people with all the authority and none of the answers sealed their own fate. Julian Croft, the engineer, was having his own personal meltdown, his ear glued to his phone. His side of the conversation was a portrait of corporate helplessness. "What do you mean the warranty is voided if the chassis is opened?" he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Sir, the patient will be dead long before your technician gets through the city traffic. No, I do not have a certified Omega-class toolkit on hand." "A cascade failure? So you're saying the entire motherboard is probably fried? But your marketing materials, your own website, says this machine is foolproof." He finally lowered the phone, his face ashen. "They can't help," he announced to the room. "Company policy forbids unauthorized field repairs. They said the machine did its job, it protected its core components by shutting down. The patient is an acceptable loss." The brutal corporate logic hung in the air like a death sentence. Dr. Vernon was fighting a losing battle. The ambu bag was keeping Sterling breathing, but it was a blunt instrument. His O2 saturation is dropping to 85%, she snapped at the resident. His kidneys are failing without dialysis. We're losing him. She was a brilliant physician, a master of interpreting data and prescribing solutions, but her entire medical arsenal depended on the technology that now sat inert before her. Her expertise was useless. She was a pilot in a cockpit with no power, pulling on a dead yoke. The room descended into a state of managed hopelessness. Tristan Sterling, his rage exhausted, had collapsed into a chair by his father's bedside, his bravado replaced by the quiet, desperate grief of a son watching his father die. Croft was pacing uselessly, wringing his hands. Dr. Vernon and her team were simply going through the motions, their frantic energy giving way to the grim resignation of defeat. From the corner to which he had been banished, Leo watched them all. He saw their panic, their despair, their surrender. But when he looked at the OmniLife 7, he didn't see a sealed black box. He saw a system. He saw a faulty power converter, a blown capacitor, and a simple logic board that had triggered a shutdown. In his mind's eye, he was already taking it apart. He could see the path, the workaround. He knew that the dialysis machine in the next room used a similar, lower-rated capacitor. He knew the defibrillator on the crash cart had a transformer he could adapt. He could feel the solution in his calloused hands. But he also knew what would happen the moment he laid one of those hands on the machine. He would be fired. His nursing license, which he had worked so hard for, would be revoked. The Sterling family would sue him into oblivion. It was his entire future, his livelihood, his name, versus the fading heartbeat on the monitor. Dr. Vernon checked her watch, then looked at the monitor, her face a mask of clinical defeat. He has 10 minutes, maybe less, before the hypoxia causes irreversible brain damage, she said to no one in particular. There's nothing more we can do. That was it. The impossible challenge. Not a request, but a death sentence, delivered by the highest authority in the room. The clock was ticking, and the only person who could stop it had been ordered to stand down and watch the man die. The experts have given up. The clock is ticking down to 0. And the only person who can save the billionaire's life is the rookie nurse who has been ordered to stand down. It's an impossible choice, his entire future, or a man's life. We tell stories for moments exactly like this one, when true genius isn't about the diploma on the wall, but about the courage in your heart and the skill in your hands. If you believe in the power of ingenuity and want to see how a scrapyard prodigy can do what millions of dollars of technology couldn't, then hit that subscribe button right now. You are about to witness a miracle of engineering. Dr. Vernon's declaration of defeat, "There's nothing more we can do," hung in the air, a cold, clinical death sentence. The rhythmic squeeze of the ambu bag was the only sound fighting the inevitable flatline. In that moment, something inside Leo Maxwell shifted. A lifetime of being told to be quiet, to know his place, to follow the rules, went silent. He looked at the dying man on the bed, at the grieving son, and at the so-called experts who were paralyzed by their own protocols. The scrapyard had taught him a fundamental truth: you don't give up on something just because it's broken. You find the salvageable parts, you improvise, and you make it work again. He took a deep breath, and walked. He didn't go to the OmniLife 7. He walked directly past Dr. Vernon and a stunned Tristan Sterling and went to the crash cart. He rummaged for a moment before his fingers closed around the handle of a pair of heavy-duty trauma shears, designed for cutting through seatbelts and leather. The solid, metallic snick of the tool opening in his hand cut through the room's despair, and every eye turned to him. "Nurse, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" Dr. Vernon's voice was sharp, a mix of fury and disbelief. "I gave you a direct order. Security. Get security in here now." Tristan, jolted from his grief, shot to his feet. "I warned you. You're finished. I'll have you arrested for assault, for destruction of property." Leo turned to face them, holding the shears like a weapon and a promise. The quiet, humble boy was gone. His voice was calm, hard, and resonated with an authority that dwarfed everyone in the room. "You're right, I'm fired," he said, meeting Tristan's furious gaze without flinching. "Which means I am no longer a nurse bound by this hospital's rules. I'm just a guy who can fix this. So here's the situation. Your father has about 8 minutes left. You can waste 3 of them having security drag me out of here while he dies, or you can all step back, stay quiet, and let me save his life." The sheer, insane confidence of his ultimatum stunned him into silence. He didn't wait for a reply. He turned his back on them and faced the dead monolith. "Julian," he said, addressing the shell-shocked engineer by his first name. "This machine has a backup battery. It's not powering the main system, which means the power converter is the point of failure. Correct?" Croft could only manage a dumbfounded nod. "Good." Leo jammed the tip of the shears into a nearly invisible seam on the OmniLife's chassis. With a grunt, he torqued his entire body. The sound of high-impact plastic cracking and groaning was a sacrilege in the pristine suite. Julian Croft let out a horrified yelp. "No! That's a hermetically sealed chassis. You're voiding everything." With a final screech of tortured metal, a large side panel popped free and clattered to the floor. Inside was a breathtakingly complex web of circuit boards, heat sinks, and ribbon cables. To the others, it was an alien city. To Leo, it was a roadmap. His scrapyard hands, the ones they'd mocked, reached inside with the confidence of a master pianist. "There," he said, pointing to a small, black scorch mark on a green board. "Primary capacitor on the power regulation board." It blew and took out the entire board with it. "The machine's fine, but it can't draw power. It's like a car with a dead battery." He was no longer a nurse. He was a field commander. "Croft, stop hyperventilating. Give me the defibrillator from the cart. And a roll of medical tape." "The defibrillator?" Vernon stammered. "The patient's heart is stable, it's not for the patient," Leo cut her off, his hands already working, snipping wires. "It has a step-up transformer I can reverse. It's the wrong voltage, but it's all we've got." He turned to the stunned resident who was still pumping the ambu bag. "You. Run to the dialysis bay in ICU. Find me a Behar Dynamics 400 model. There's a gray box on the back with 4 screws. Open it and bring me the largest cylindrical capacitor you see inside. Go. Now." The resident, a doctor who outranked Leo in every conceivable way, simply stared for a second, then, compelled by the sheer force of Leo's command, dropped the bag and sprinted out of the room. Dr. Vernon and Tristan Sterling could only watch, their authority utterly erased. They were witnessing a primal act of creation. The room, once a temple of sleek, untouchable technology, was rapidly turning into a chaotic workshop. And at its center was the quiet boy they had dismissed, his hands now a blur, cannibalizing their sacred relics to build a miracle from the wreckage of their failure. The clock was ticking. The resident burst back into the room, breathless, clutching the capacitor from the dialysis machine like a holy relic. "Is this it?" he panted. Leo snatched it from his hand without a word, his eyes scanning its specifications. It wasn't perfect, the capacitance was slightly lower, the voltage tolerance tighter, but it was close enough. It would have to be. Julian Croft, the engineer, watched in a state of professional agony. Every instinct, every chapter of every manual he had ever studied, was screaming in protest. Leo was working not like a technician, but like a battlefield medic, stripping wires with his teeth when the shears were too slow, using sterile medical tape as an electrical insulator, and creating a new circuit path with a pair of stainless steel forceps. It was a brutal, ugly, and utterly brilliant act of engineering heresy. Croft, the man of protocols and procedures, saw the genius in Leo's madness. He was witnessing the birth of something impossible, a custom-built, improvised bypass, created from scrap, designed to resurrect a machine that its own makers had declared dead. The engineer's horror began to curdle into a strange, unwilling awe. He found himself reaching for a roll of tape, handing it to Leo before he was even asked, a silent, unconscious act of surrender. Dr. Vernon's world had shrunk to the vital signs monitor. The numbers were a cascade of failure. "Sats are at 82%, Leo," she cried out, her voice stripped of its authority, now just the raw fear of a doctor watching a patient die. "We're in the window for severe hypoxic brain injury. He's bradycardic." 2 more minutes, Leo grunted, not looking up from his work. He was wrestling the transformer out of the defibrillator's casing, his knuckles bloody. "Croft, I need you to hold this wire. Steady. If it touches the main heatsink, it'll short out the entire board and we're done." Vernon was now completely dependent on the nurse she had dismissed as an incompetent fool. Her medical degree, her years of celebrated practice, meant nothing here. She was a spectator, reduced to calling out the grim statistics that measured the seconds left on the clock. Her entire universe of knowledge was useless. The only thing that mattered in the world right now was the skill of the boy with the scrapyard hands. Tristan Sterling was silent. He stood by the wall, a statue of terrified hope. The arrogant, entitled billionaire's son had vanished. He was watching this strange, grease-stained nurse, this boy he had threatened and humiliated, attempt to weave a miracle out of wires and tape. He had spent his entire life believing that money was the ultimate power, the key that could unlock any door, solve any problem. But money couldn't fix this. The army of experts he could summon with a single phone call were useless. The only thing standing between his father and death was the raw, uncertified genius of a working-class kid who saw the world not in terms of price tags, but in how things fit together. The final, critical moment of the repair arrived. Leo had the new capacitor taped into place, a grotesque appendage on the pristine circuit board. Now he had to connect his makeshift transformer, bridging the power from the backup battery directly to the machine's core logic, completely bypassing the fried regulator. It was the mechanical equivalent of open heart surgery, performed with a butter knife and a prayer. "I need another pair of hands," Leo said, his focus absolute. He looked up and his eyes met Dr. Vernon's. "Doctor, I need you to hold these 2 leads. An inch apart. Don't let them touch, no matter what. Your hands are steadier than anyone else's here." It was a command, but it was also the first shred of respect she had been shown since the chaos began. It acknowledged her skill, her steadiness as a physician, and for a second, made her a participant rather than a spectator. Dr. Alana Vernon, the celebrity cardiologist, found herself kneeling on the floor, holding 2 bare wires in the guts of a broken machine, her career and her patient's life entirely in the hands of a rookie nurse. With the leads held in place, Leo made the final, delicate solder point using a heated probe from a cauterizing tool. The bypass was complete. A monstrous, ugly tangle of scavenged parts was now grafted into the soul of the OmniLife 7. Leo sat back on his heels, his face smeared with sweat and thermal paste. "Okay," he said, his voice raspy. "That's it." He looked at the ugly, beautiful mess he had created. "This is either going to reboot the system, or it's going to trip every circuit breaker on this floor and set the machine on fire." He reached for the main power button. The patient's heart rate was now dipping below 40. Every person in the room held their breath. The world stopped. Leo's finger hovered over the switch. Leo's finger pressed the power button. For one long, agonizing second, nothing happened. The only sound was the failing beep of the heart monitor, a funeral drum counting down the final moments. Dr. Vernon squeezed her eyes shut. Tristan's face was a mask of despair. The gamble had failed. Then, a single green LED flickered to life on the machine's control panel. A low, guttural hum began to emanate from the chassis, not the polished whisper of before, but the raw, powerful thrum of an engine that had been jump-started. The main screen, dark for so long, flashed a brilliant, electric blue. It wasn't the friendly user interface. It was a screen of raw code, a command line interface that looked like the machine's exposed soul. White text began to scroll rapidly down the black screen, a language only 2 people in the room could comprehend. System reboot initiated. Primary power regulator, offline. Critical failure. Auxiliary power bypass, active. Warning, voltage unregulated. Core processor, online. Dialysis module, online. Ventilator module, online. And then, a sound more beautiful than any symphony, a deep, powerful whoosh as the ventilator kicked in, filling Alistair Sterling's lungs with a perfect, measured breath of life. The crude, frantic rhythm of the resident's hand pumping was replaced by the smooth, steady, life-giving pulse of the resurrected machine. Dr. Vernon's eyes shot to the vital signs monitor. She watched the numbers climb as if witnessing a resurrection. His O2 saturation is climbing. 88. 92. 96%. Her voice cracked, a choked sob of disbelief and relief. Blood pressure is stabilizing. Heart rate is returning to normal. He's back. My God, he's back. She looked from the screen to the grease-smeared boy kneeling on the floor, her eyes finally seeing him, not as a subordinate, but as the man who had just performed an impossible miracle. Tristan Sterling heard the ventilator's rhythmic breath, and it was like hearing his father's voice. The sight of his father's chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm broke him. The anger, the entitlement, the fear, it all shattered and washed away. He collapsed back into the chair, buried his face in his hands, and let out a raw, ragged sob of pure, unadulterated gratitude. The boy he had threatened, the help he had tried to have fired, had just handed him back his father's life. But it was Julian Croft, the engineer, who truly understood the depth of the miracle. He stared at the diagnostic screen, his mouth hanging open, his mind struggling to comprehend the engineering heresy he was witnessing. He began to murmur the readouts aloud, translating the data into a testament of Leo's genius. It's impossible, he whispered, his voice filled with a reverence that bordered on fear. He didn't just bypass the power board. He's using the defibrillator's transformer as a crude AC to DC converter, and, my God, he's using the capacitor from the dialysis machine to smooth out the current spikes. It's a Frankenstein's monster of a circuit. It violates a dozen safety protocols and a handful of the laws of electrical engineering. It shouldn't be stable for more than a second, but it's holding. It's perfect. He looked at Leo with the wide, stunned eyes of a village priest who had just met God. Leo, however, was not celebrating. He was on his feet, his eyes scanning the diagnostic text, his mind already 3 steps ahead. It's a temporary fix, he announced, his voice cutting through the awe-filled room, pulling everyone back to reality. The voltage is all over the place. It's holding him, but the heat sinks weren't designed for this kind of unregulated load. Croft, I need you to find me the core temperature readings. If they pass 80 degrees Celsius, the processor will melt. He then turned to Dr. Vernon. Doctor, he said, and the simple title was a profound transfer of power. He was handing the medical command back to her. He's stable, but the machine is not. What are your medical priorities right now? The question jolted her back into her role. She was a doctor again, not a spectator. His kidneys, she said immediately. We need to run dialysis and clear the toxins from his blood. Okay, Leo said with a nod. He typed a quick command into a keyboard he had plugged into a service port. Dialysis module is engaged. Croft, keep an eye on the power draw. He worked for another minute, securing a loose wire with more medical tape, ensuring his grotesque, beautiful creation was as stable as it could be. The immediate crisis was over. Alistair Sterling was breathing, his blood was being cleaned, and his heart was beating steadily. Leo finally took a step back, wiping his bloody, greasy hands on a corner of his scrubs. He looked at the OmniLife 7, its side ripped open, its guts spilling out in a chaotic but perfectly functional tapestry of scavenged parts. It was a monument to function over form, a testament to the fact that when things fall apart, true genius isn't about following the manual. It's about knowing how to write a new one in real time. The room was filled with a new kind of silence. It was not the silence of despair and impending death, but a fragile, awestruck quiet, punctuated by the steady, life-giving hum of Leo's creation and the rhythmic beep of the restored vital signs monitor. The immediate danger had passed, leaving the 4 occupants of the room to grapple with the sheer impossibility of what they had just witnessed. Alistair Sterling was stable, breathing peacefully, entirely unaware of the miracle that had been woven from scrap and genius to save him. The first to break the silence was Tristan Sterling. He rose from his chair, his movements slow, his face stripped bare of its lifelong armor of arrogance. He looked at his father, then at the monstrous, beautiful machine, and finally, his gaze fell upon Leo. He walked over, not with the stride of a billionaire's son, but with the halting steps of a penitent. He started, his voice thick with emotion. He swallowed hard, his eyes welling up. I don't know what to say. The things I said to you, the way I treated you. I was a monster. He looked at Leo's greasy, bloody hands, the very hands he had mocked, and saw them for what they were. You saved him. While we were all panicking and posturing, you saved my father's life. A tear traced a path down his cheek. Thank you. And from the bottom of my heart, I am so sorry. The apology was raw, broken, and utterly sincere. It was the first wave of a justice that had nothing to do with punishment and everything to do with a profound, humbling realization. Leo, unused to being the center of any kind of attention, simply gave a small, awkward nod. I'm just glad he's okay, sir. The door to the suite swished open, admitting the hospital administrator, a man whose face was a thundercloud of controlled panic after being summoned by a code blue in the VIP wing. He saw the gutted, rewired machine, the parts strewn across the floor, and his eyes bulged. What in God's name happened here? Croft, report. Julian Croft, who had been sketching Leo's bypass circuit on a sterile wipe, stood up straight. The old Croft would have deflected, blamed, or hidden behind protocol. This new man, however, had been fundamentally changed. There was a catastrophic, unserviceable failure of the OmniLife 7, sir, he began, his voice clear and steady. My training and equipment were useless. Per the manufacturer, the situation was unsalvageable. He then turned and pointed directly at Leo. This young man, Nurse Leo Maxwell, diagnosed the problem when none of us could, and then proceeded to build a fully functional, life-sustaining bypass out of scavenged parts in under 10 minutes. What he did was not in any textbook. It was, without a doubt, the most brilliant act of field engineering I have ever had the honor to witness. He alone is the reason Mr. Sterling is still alive. The administrator stared, speechless, his anger deflating into utter bewilderment. The final piece of the room's transformation came from Dr. Alana Vernon. She had been observing Leo with a clinical intensity, as if he were a new medical phenomenon she was struggling to classify. Her entire professional identity, built on a foundation of data, credentials, and superior technology, had been shaken to its core. She approached him, her usual air of detached superiority completely gone, replaced by a deep, intellectual respect. Mr. Maxwell, she began, the use of his surname a formal sign of a new beginning. Leo. Your diagnostic intuition, your creativity, and your profound grace under impossible pressure, they are qualities that cannot be taught. She took a breath, the confession costing her a piece of her pride. I was wrong. Utterly and completely. I have built my career on trusting the machine, on believing in the data. I nearly let my patient die because I couldn't see past my own protocols. You didn't just fix a machine today. You reminded me what a healer truly is, someone who solves the problem, with whatever tools they have. She paused, then made her move. A talent like yours is wasted here. This hospital is launching a new medtech development wing next year, a place for innovation. I want you to help me lead it. Not as a nurse, not as an engineer, but as our chief innovator. You can write your own job description. Name your price. The offer, on top of everything else, was too much for Leo. The apology, the praise, the life-altering job proposals, it was a world away from the quiet, methodical satisfaction of simply making something broken work again. He looked at the mess of wires and tools on the floor. Thank you, Doctor. I'll have to think about that, he stammered, overwhelmed. Then, his natural instincts took over. I should probably start cleaning this up. The simple, practical statement was so profoundly Leo, so completely out of sync with the momentous events of the last hour, that it broke the tension. He was not a hero or a chief innovator. He was a tinkerer. A fixer. "My shift is over, actually," he said, seeing his escape. "I need to write a report." He quietly backed away towards the door, leaving the three most powerful people in the room to stare at the humming, monstrous testament to the quiet genius they had almost thrown away. Leo walked away from the sovereign wing, leaving the hushed carpets and stunned silence behind him. With each step, the opulence faded, replaced by the familiar, practical reality of the main hospital, the scuffed linoleum floors, the overhead pages, the faint, clean scent of antiseptic. He was returning to his world. His shift was over, but he didn't head for the locker room or the exit. An invisible magnet was pulling him downward, to the one place in the entire building where he felt most at home. He took the service elevator to the sub-basement, a place the esteemed doctors and wealthy patrons didn't even know existed. Down here was the hospital's heart, the maintenance workshop. It was a cavern of concrete and exposed pipes, smelling of lubricating oil, hot metal, and ozone. It was a library of forgotten things, old motors, retired equipment, and shelves overflowing with the guts of 100 different machines. To others, it was a tomb of scrap. To Leo, it was a toy store. On a scarred wooden workbench, under the bare light of a single bulb, sat an old infusion pump, tagged for disposal. Without thinking, Leo picked up a Phillips head screwdriver. His hands, the same hands that had just performed a miracle of life-or-death improvisation, moved with a familiar, calming grace. He loosened the screws on the casing, his fingers tracing the simple logic of the machine's design. The frantic, high-stakes pressure of the VIP suite melted away, replaced by the quiet, methodical peace of simply making something work. This was his truth. His genius wasn't for the breathless applause of the elite. It was for the quiet satisfaction of a perfectly seated gear, a clean electrical contact, a machine brought back from the brink. He remembered his grandfather's gruff voice from years ago in the scrapyard, "Anything's got value, Leo. You just gotta be willing to get your hands dirty and find it." He thought of Dr. Vernon's incredible offer, chief innovator. A lab, a budget, a title. But it was a job of meetings, theories, and prototypes. It would take him away from this. It would take him away from the hands-on, gritty, essential work of fixing what was broken, right here, right now. "I thought I might find you down here." Leo looked up. Julian Croft was standing in the doorway, his immaculate engineer's uniform looking comically out of place in the organized chaos of the workshop. He was holding the sterile wipe on which he'd sketched Leo's bypass design. "They're turning the hospital upside down looking for you," Croft said, his voice holding a new, profound respect. "Vernon is already drafting a proposal. Tristan Sterling wants to endow a new wing in your name." He gestured around the dusty workshop, a look of genuine confusion on his face. "They're going to offer you the world, and you're down here, fixing a 10-year-old infusion pump that's worth less than the shoes on Tristan's feet." The question hung in the air, why? Leo tightened the last screw on the pump's casing and pressed the power button. The small screen flickered to life with a healthy, green glow. He turned it over in his hands, a quiet smile on his face. "This pump will probably go to the general pediatric ward," Leo said, his voice soft but sure. "They're always short-staffed and their equipment is always the oldest. For a sick kid on that floor, this little machine is the whole world." He looked up and met Croft's eyes, his own gaze clear and certain. "I appreciate the offers. I really do. But being chief innovator, that's not me. I'm a nurse. And I'm a mechanic." He placed the now functional pump gently on the bench. "My place isn't in a boardroom, designing the next $1 million machine that no one knows how to fix. My place is down here, in the scrapyard. My place is where the broken things are." In that moment, Croft understood. Leo's victory wasn't about climbing the ladder to their world. It was about showing them the value of his. The true reward, for Leo, was not the fame or the fortune. It was the quiet, steady hum of a machine doing its job. Leo had found his power not by becoming one of them, but by forcing them to recognize the quiet, essential genius of being himself. He had proven that the most important hands in a hospital aren't always the ones holding the scalpel. Sometimes, they're the ones holding the screwdriver. Leo's story is a tribute to the quiet geniuses who keep our world running. It proves that some of the most valuable skills don't come with a fancy diploma, but are learned in a workshop, a garage, or a scrapyard. True brilliance is often found in the hands of those who can do, fix, and create when the so-called experts are powerless. We all have someone like that in our lives, the person we call when something is broken, the one with that magic, practical touch. Who is the Leo Maxwell you know? A parent, a friend, a mentor? Give them a shout out in the comments below. Let's celebrate the everyday fixers and makers who truly deserve the spotlight. If you love stories that honor the unsung heroes among us, make sure to follow our channel. You are a vital part of our community, and we can't wait to share our next story with you.